Hello and welcome back to Something Z, and welcome to If Deku Had a Copy Quirk Part 5. Last time on the What If, the finals for Class 1A happened, and with the combined efforts of Izuku and Bakugo, they were barely able to pass. And after that, Class 1A and 1B went to the summer training camp, but after a couple of days of training, the camp gets attacked by villains. And on the night of the attack, Bakugo and Izuku got captured by the League of Villains, and the quirks Izuku currently has are Muscle Augmentation, Playa Body, Hell Flame, and Force Field. Okay, so now that's out of the way, let's jump into the video in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so we begin this what if a couple of days after the attack, and Izuku and Bakugo were currently being held in anti-quirk cuff, and the League was currently watching Aizawa, Nezu, and Vlad at the press conference, and Aizawa was just asked if Bakugo would betray them since he has a record of violence and has been seen to have a short temper. And when Aizawa heard this, he told the reporters that Bakugo is a true hero, and someone who tries the hardest to get better. And after Aizawa told the reporters this, Shigaraki turned off the TV, and when he did, the League that was in the bar turned their attention to the two students. Then he began to undo the anti-quirk cuffs and chains on Bakugo, and when it was completely taken off, Shigaraki backed away, and he asked Bakugo if he would join him and the League and become a villain. And hearing this, Bakugo then asked what would happen to Izuku. And hearing this, Shigaraki told him that Izuku's quirk is too helpful, and it would benefit them to keep him, so he doesn't have a choice. And once he said that, Bakugo began to fire explosions, and he began to fight the League. And while he was fighting, Izuku was stuck in the chair, unable to do anything. But after some time, Shigaraki got to Izuku and he put his hand onto Izuku's neck, which made Bakugo stop. Then Shigaraki told Bakugo that if he kept fighting him, he would destroy Izuku's neck, instantly killing him. But before anything else could happen, there was a knock on the door, and after a couple of seconds, the wall of the front door got destroyed, so there's now a giant hole. And standing in the hole was a group of heroes, with them being Kamui Woods, All Might, Edgeshot, and some small old man Izuku didn't recognize. And seeing them, Shigaraki was about to put his final finger on Izuku's neck, but before he could, the old man flung himself towards Shigaraki and he kicked him in the face, launching him a couple of feet away. And seeing all of this, Kurogiri tried to make a portal out of the hideout, but before he could, Edgeshot knocked him out, and when he hit the floor, Kamui Woods wrapped up all the villains by extending his arms. Then after getting captured, Dabi tried to burn the wood, but before he could cause any real damage, Gran Torino quickly kicked Dabi in the face, knocking him out as well. Then while the villains were tied up, All Might grabbed a key that was on the ground, and he used it to free Izuku, giving him back his quirks. Then right after Izuku was freed, weird portals opened up that weren't Kurogiri's, and it summoned Nomus into and around the hideout, and the portal appeared right next to the villains and it sucked them up, teleporting them away. And before anyone could figure out what was going on, Izuku and Bakugo got engulfed into a portal. And when the portal was gone, Izuku and Bakugo find themselves in the remains of a destroyed city block, and around them was the League of Villains. But there was now one more person, and he seemed to be more frightening than the rest of them, because he seemed to have an ominous aura around him, and that villain was All For One. And after looking around a bit more, Izuku was able to tell that there were pro heroes on the ground unconscious. But before Izuku could examine the area more, the League of Villains that were awake started to run at the two students, and they began to fight. And after a couple of minutes of fighting, All Might comes from the skies above, and he lands in front of All For One, and the two collide. And when they collided, the both of them seemed to be at equal strengths, and after some time just holding each other's fists and looking at each other, the two began to fight. And after a couple more minutes of fighting, Izuku and Bakugo were currently in Izuku's force field, being barraged by attacks from the League of Villains, and they were trying to figure out a way out. And while they were discussing what they should do, they realized that All Might wasn't going all out, and they both believed that it was because they were there, and that he was scared to attack them in the crossfire. And after some time, Izuku noticed a piece of red hair coming out from behind a wall, a couple feet away. And after a minute, Izuku was able to decide what he needed to do. So Izuku told Bakugo to put his arms down, and when he was ready, Izuku put down the dome. And when he did, Bakugo fired an explosion, which flung him into the air, and it created a dirt cloud. And when Izuku was hidden, he used his muscle augmentation to increase his muscles, and he jumped into the air. And when he was in the air for a couple of seconds, he pointed to where he saw Kirishima. And seeing this, Bakugo flew there, while Izuku ran as fast as he could while still being hidden in the dirt cloud. And by the time the dirt cloud was gone, the two were already behind the wall, hiding next to Kirishima, Momo, Todoroki, and Ida. And after a couple of seconds, the group runs away, because they were in the clear since the villains didn't know where they were. And eventually they got to the plaza, and there, they were able to watch the fight between All Might and All For One, with the results being the exact same as in the canon. And a couple days later, Aizawa and All Might told all the parents of Class 1A that the students will be moving into the dorms, and because Izuku doesn't get as injured as he would have in the canon, Inko agreed to let Izuku live in the dorms. And a couple days later, the students move in, with the thing with Sue still happening. So now we skip a week before the school year begins, wins. And by this point, Class 1A has settled into the dorms. And that morning, Aizawa tells 1A to meet him in Gym Gamma wearing their hero costumes. And when they all get there, Aizawa, Cementos, and Ectoplasm were waiting for them. And they were told that they will be coming up with ultimate moves for the upcoming provisional license exams that were in about a week. And when Aizawa was done talking, he spread out Class 1A through the gymnasium, taking along an Ectoplasm clone. And for Izuku's hero costume modification, it's about the same as it was before, but now it's more durable, stretchable, and more resilient to different temperatures. And for Izuku's ultimate move is a technique that he calls Twain Mimic. And when he uses this, he uses two quirks at the same time. And no matter what quirks they are, he can only hold it for about 2 minutes. And the drawback is that the drawbacks from each quirk is doubled. And he can't use his quirk for 5 minutes afterward if he does it for the whole 2 minutes. So now we skip to the day of the exams, and when Class 1A gets to where the exams are taking place. And when they do, they meet the same people as they do in the canon. So they know about Inasa and Miss Joke. And after a bit of talking, Class 1A went to the examination site. And when they got dressed into their hero costumes, they went into the exam room. And when the main examiner believed that all the examinees were there, he began to explain the first part of the exams, which only the first 100 examinees that finish will pass. And when he's done explaining, he passes out 3 balls and targets to every student. And when they all place them on themselves, the walls of the room began to unfold, and they all find themselves in a large arena. Then they were given a couple minutes to split up, and most of Class 1A stuck together, but Bakugo, Kirishima, and Kaminari leave to form their own group. And going by himself, Todoroki leaves as well. And after the couple minutes were up, the exams began. And when it started, all the other schools began to attack UA, and Izuku was able to protect him and his classmates by making a dome, which protected them from the balls. And when he wasn't protecting, he used his muscle augmentation to outrun the balls being thrown at him, and to attack faster. But after some time, Yo was able to tell that they wouldn't be able to get Class 1A if they were all together. So he put his hands to the ground, and he began to vibrate the ground. And after a couple of seconds, he began to create tremors, which split up all of Class 1A. And while Izuku was falling, he dropped all of his balls. And when Izuku was able to see again, he got up and he began to walk around. And after some time, he was able to figure out that there was no one around him. And seeing this, Izuku used muscle augmentation and he began to run around to find his classmates, because he knows that if he was found by himself by an enemy school, he would be easily picked off. But after a couple minutes of running, Izuku stops to catch his breath, and while he was distracted, he gets pushed to the ground, and pinned with his face to the ground. And while he was pinned, one of his targets got hit, and before any more could be hit, Izuku pushed himself off the ground, still using muscle augmentation, which flung him into the air. And when he landed, he began to look around to see who pushed him, but when he did, he found no one. But after a couple of seconds, someone appeared behind him, and he got scratched on the back. And feeling this, Izuku turned around, and when he did, he lost Kami again. And seeing that she can disappear and reappear, Izuku began to increase his temperature, which caused his hair to light on fire. And the two began to fight, with Izuku using his flames to fight Kami, while Kami appeared and disappeared. But after a couple minutes of fighting, a class noticed multiple waves of flames, and when they noticed it, they ran to the source of where it came from. And when they did, they saw Izuku. And when Izuku saw them, he looked to where he last saw Kami. And when he did, he saw no one was there. And after a couple of seconds, they began to barrage Izuku with balls. So Izuku then increased his muscle size, and he began to run around avoiding the balls. And after around a minute, Ochako appeared on top of a rock, and she shouted for Izuku's hand to pull him up. But while she was shouting, Ochako tripped on the rock she was standing on. And while she was falling, Izuku ran to her and he grabbed her. And when he caught her, he began to run away. And eventually, the two were able to lose the enemy school. And once they lost them, the two of them hid behind a rock. And while they were hidden, Izuku was scouting the area to make sure they were still hidden. But while he was scouting, Izuku remembered that if it really was Ochako, she would have been able to float away, since lately that's what she's been training on. And while he was coming to this realization, Ochako was moving closer and closer to one of his targets, about to hit it with a ball. But before the ball could hit, Izuku stretched out his arm using Plyo Body, and he swatted the ball away, launching it out of Ochako's hand. Then he told her that she must have been a fake, since the real Ochako could have easily have gotten out of this situation. And realizing that she's been found out, Ochako's face began to melt, and once it was done melting, it revealed that Ochako was Kami. But before anything else could really happen, the real Ochako and Sero appear, and when Kami sees them, she retreats. And after confirming that the two are the real things, the three come up with a plan to get to the targets they need. And in the plan, Izuku is bait, so he used muscle augmentation and Endeavor's quirk, so he was using Twain Mimic. So he was using his strengths and flames to propel him around the arena. And after a a minute, Izuku was able to get enough people, so he stopped. And when he stopped, he deactivated both of his quirks. And when the group was beginning to walk closer to Izuku, Ochaka threw weightless rocks above the group, with Sero's tape attached to them. And when they were over the group, she gave them weight again, making the rocks begin to fall to the ground. But before the tape hit Izuku activated his flames, and he used it to fly himself out of the way, which he was barely able to escape. And when Izuku got to his two classmates, he grabbed a ball that was laying on the ground from one of the people that they captured. And once he got the ball, the three got the targets they needed. And once they got the targets they needed, they were told on the speakers to go to the waiting room. And when the three get to the waiting room, Bakugo, Kirishima, and Kaminari got there at the same time. So now we skip to when the first phase of the exams was over. And when it was, they were given a couple minutes to rest. And when the break was over, the main examiner got onto a podium, and he began to congratulate them for making it so far. Then he shows them on big screens in the front of the room, the arena they were just in blow up. And when the explosions were over, the examiner told them that a villain just attacked the city, then fled. But there were many civilians that got caught in the crossfire, and he told them that it was their job to rescue the injured civilians. And once he said that, the room began to unfold. And when the room was completely flat, the exams began. And when it did, most of the Class 1A stuck in a giant group, besides Bakugo, Kirishima, and Kaminari. And after a couple of seconds of running, the group comes across a small child who has blood coming from their head. And Izuku got some points taken off his scores because when he was inspecting the kid for injuries, he blurted out that this doesn't look good. And after Izuku got yelled at by the kid for being too blunt, Izuku put on a smile and he told the kid that everything would be okay. And when the kid hears this, he allows Izuku to take him. So Izuku then increased the size of his muscles, and he grabbed the kid, and he began to run to the first aid station. And after Izuku was able to secure the kid, he was about to run back to the city to find more victims. But before he could move, he and everyone else in the area heard the main examiner on the speakers tell them that the villain that attacked the city has come back for round 2. And right after he was done saying that, someone burst through the walls of the arena, and when the dirt and dust settles, Izuku and everyone else at the first aid station sees Gang Orca and dozens of his henchmen. And seeing this, Izuku ran towards the group. But before he gets to them, he gets stopped by Yo, who continues to run towards the group. Then when he was somewhat close to the group, he put his hands to the ground, and he used his quirk to create tremors under the group. But as a counterattack, Gang Orca used his quirk on Yo point blank with an ultrasonic wave attack, paralyzing him. And when Yo hit the ground, Izuku ran towards the group again. And while he was running, he used Playa Body, and he stretched out his arms towards Yo, and he tapped him on the shoulder, copying his quirk, in exchange getting rid of Force Field. Then when Izuku copied the quirk, Izuku turned his arm back to normal. Then he used muscle augmentation, and he ran towards the group of villains as fast as he could. And while he was running, Inasa and Todoroki ran with him to fight the group of villains. Then the same things happened between Inasa and Todoroki while Izuku tried to fight Gang Orca. But luckily, when Izuku saw that Todoroki and Inasa were fighting, he turned off muscle augmentation, and he turned on Hell Flame, which allowed him to continue fighting Orca without too much drawback. And while he was fighting Orca used a water ball to wet himself, because if he didn't, he would have been weakened when he dried out. And eventually, after a couple minutes, a stray flame from Todoroki and Inasa fighting began to go towards a paralyzed Yo. And seeing this, Izuku used his ultimate move to also activate muscle augmentation. And seeing this, Izuku used both his muscle augmentation and Hell Flame to run towards Yo as fast as he could. And he was able to pick him up before either of them got hit with the flames. And once Izuku picked up Yo, he turned off Hell Flame. And while Izuku was running to find a safe place to put Yo, he shouted, "What the hell is wrong with you two?" And hearing this, the two decided to work together. So after 30 seconds, the two were able to surround Gang Orca in a spiral of flames. But even though it was weakening him, it wasn't enough to defeat him, since he had a water bottle. But since he was using the water bottle the whole time while fighting Izuku, he was weaker than he would have been. And while Orca was trapped in the spiral of flames, Izuku jumped into it, and he began to fight Orca using muscle augmentation. And while he was fighting, he would also use vibrations to make the ground under Orca tremble, which put him off balance, which would also give Izuku more opening to attack. And after 2 minutes, Izuku's ultimate move wore off, so he went back to normal. And when he got turned back to normal, Orca held him by his arm. But before he could do anything, the main examiner announced on the speakers that the final civilian has been saved. So now the exams are over. And that's one really the What If. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you next time on Something Z. Oh, also, I also recorded my 1-year anniversary video, and I'm reading my first ever script. So I wanted to know, should I edit it so you hear all my pain? I don't know. I'm gonna edit it so it doesn't seem too janky because I misread it a lot. But just so you can hear my pain. I don't know. Just put it in the comments below or something. Anyways, like I said before, I hope to see you next time on Something Z. Also, thank you for 500 subs. Bye.